Chapter 18. Possible groups responsible for 9/11. 9/11 was done by us, we did it, okay? And by we I know that it is not the people of New York. I know that it is not all members of the CIA, definitely not. However, it was done by the Americans. We did this. If there were any hijackers, if there was any indigenous hijackers, we identified them. We created them as the FBI does with all the other terrorist attacks. They are all fake attacks. The FBI recruits some dumb mixed up kid, some unstable individual, and tries to get them to do something, and that is exactly what they would have done on 9/11. It was like a magician's trick. They used the airplanes because they knew you would look at the airplanes and in your mind you would see cause and effect. Oh, the airplane hit the tower, oh, the tower collapses, therefore the airplane fire brought down the towers. Obviously that is not what happened. This is a quote by Susan Lindhauer, journalist, war activist and back-channel for the CIA. According to writer Markia Freeman, there are three groups responsible for 9/11 and the fake war on terror. These include the nation of Saudi Arabia, which is an oil-rich nation, which funded both the Clintons and Bushes, beheads its citizens and forbids women from driving cars. After the 9/11 attacks, the FBI named 15 out of the 19 hijackers to be of Saudi nationality. When Congress was discussing the possibility of releasing 28 pages of information regarding 9/11, in 2016, Saudi Arabia then blackmailed the United States by threatening to sell $750 billion in United States treasuries in order to collapse the US dollar. Eventually the pages were released showing how the Saudis used spies to launder money to the 9/11 hijackers. Saudi Arabia was never attacked as a response because they are a known ally of the United States. Another responsible group are what are called neocons, and the members were in key positions in the Bush administration during the 9/11 attacks. Many were also part of PNAC, Project for the New American Century, and their statements include this classic: this process of transformation is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. According to Freeman, the third group is the Zionist regime of Israel and its intelligence agency named Mossad. After the incident, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the 9/11 attacks were very good and that they had swung American public opinion in our favor, and that we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq, and it will generate immediate sympathy for Israel. Apparently Mossad used a front company called Urban Moving Systems to blow up bombs and frame Muslims. An Israeli company vacated their WTC lease only 1 week before 9/11, incurring a fine to do so. Israeli backdoor technology penetrated the U.S. government's telecom system and compromised national security. Over 100 Mossad agents were arrested before and after 9/11, before quietly being sent back to Israel. Writer Max Slavo also provides evidence that the CIA has leaked some evidence that 9/11 was sponsored by the state. He says that after the 9/11 attacks, the public were told that Al-Qaeda acted alone, with no state sponsors, but the White House never let it see an entire section of the Congress investigative report on 9/11 dealing with specific sources of foreign support for the 19 hijackers, 15 of whom were Saudi nationals. President Bush inexplicably censored 28 pages of the 800-page report. Text isn't just blacked out here and there in this critical yet missing section. The pages are completely blank, except for dotted lines where an estimated 7,200 words once stood. He also says that a pair of lawmakers who had recently read the redacted portion said that they are absolutely shocked at the level of foreign state involvement in the attacks. A NY Post investigation revealed that the Saudi agents, officials and operatives in Virginia, Florida, California and D.C. provided direct support by way of funding or intelligence to those involved in the attack. Former Italian President Francesco Cossiga commented that Mossad and the CIA were behind the 9/11 attacks and said that all the intelligence services of America and Europe know well that the disastrous attack has been planned and realized from the Mossad with the aid of the Zionist world in order to put under accusation the Arabic countries and in order to induce the Western powers to take part in Iraq and Afghanistan. Writer Arjun Walia gives us some forgotten facts about 9/11 and they include the fact that over 2,200 architects and engineers who come from the top of industry and academia have crushed the official 9/11 Commission report. Professor Lynn Margulis from the Department of Geosciences at the University of Massachusetts said that all 3 buildings were destroyed by carefully planned, orchestrated and executed controlled demolition. 2 firefighters that were called to the scene on the day and were in the buildings at the time had no doubt that what they heard were multiple explosions. The list goes on and on and on. Writer Michael Thomas from State of the Nation also commented that the US, Israel, Saudi Arabia and the UK are all complicit in the execution and cover-up of this crime against humanity. Edward Snowden opted to stay in Russia after fleeing the United States with his NSA treasure trove, and this empowered Russia to reveal truths about 9/11. And now the Kremlin conducts periodic and strategic data dumps concerning the 9/11 facts. Thomas highlighted a YouTube video regarding 9/11 truths by a group of truth seekers who had knowledge, experience and access to insider information. It is entitled Veterans Today Radio Interview on 9/22/14 with Gordon Duff, Jim Fetzer, Preston James and Stu Webb. Here is a transcription of some interesting points. World Trade Center destroyed by nuclear weapons. Able Danger investigation proved that the FBI was complicit in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. Mossad agent Monica Lewinsky was set up to get Clinton to stop investigating the Oklahoma City nuclear event. Able Danger pre-report listed that the CIA, Mossad and Saudi intelligence were operating in the U.S. as terror cells who called themselves by the code name of Al-Qaeda. Able Danger investigated the theft of nuclear material and the Department of Energy, stating that a high-ranking person within the U.S. Energy Department was an Israeli agent who made it available to Victor Bout, and those working with him were all directly involved. The Russians sent a report to Gordon Duff of people who planned the destruction of the trade centers. The attacks were done partially as nuclear blackmail and to also stop Able Danger investigating the theft of over $200 trillion and 350 nuclear warheads. The Center of Nuclear Warheads name pits were sent to Pantex in Amarillo, Texas to convert into fuel. The pits were removed from there, and as the Israelis were no longer able to produce nuclear weapons after the Dimona reactor operation crashed between 1988 and 1994, they found a way to take them from there. This group controls members of Congress through gambling money in Las Vegas and Macau, running prostitution and rent boy groups across the US and in Washington, and runs a blackmail organization out of Cuba. The organization handles its cash through Bain Capital. The first director of Homeland Security is listed as the head of Al-Qaeda. ISIS is a creation of the CIA, Saudi and Mossad intelligence, codenamed Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden was a phantom enemy created to mask the real enemy and only enemy, the director of Homeland Security. The real bin Laden and the head of Al-Qaeda Director of Homeland Security, had the help of a U.S. attorney and head of a Canadian distilling family, the wealthiest in Canada, and the help of the mayor of Nick, a Nick police commissioner who were involved in planning 9/11 with the then President of South Africa and the Prime Minister of Israel. The part of the Pentagon that was hit was the site of the able danger officers that were investigating the missing nuclear weapons. 35 out of 50 able danger investigators were killed in the attack. CEOs of key firms working in the World Trade Center were invited to a private golf outing but were kept secure at Arford Air Force Base in Nebraska. The golf outing was sponsored by Warren Buffett. There are witness statements involving people who had driven nuclear weapons in refrigeration trucks full of cow carcasses. They were then sorted inside a refrigeration facility before being transported to fertilizer plants before being moved through the port of Houston. These people have been in witness protection for years. Israeli teams around New York were being watched and arrests were made of dancing Israelis who were investigated for smuggling nuclear weapons into the USA. One group was arrested on the George Washington Bridge who had planted explosives where cables connect into the ground. Electronic warfare jammers were placed on several high buildings in Fort Lee by the group. Their job was to jam the Port Authority and the Nick Fire Department radios. Finally, there was an arrest of a group of Israelis who were released to the Nick police commissioner and were never seen again, and the Nick commissioner went to prison. Interestingly, Jim W. Dean, editor of Veterans Today, comments that mini nukes were used at Ground Zero because investigators were on the scene quickly testing for a nuclear-triggered explosion before we knew that it was a coup by these same elites. Now proven by the classified Sandia Lab report, http://www.sandia.gov/, whose investigators were quietly on the Ground Zero scene along with the intel agencies of several major countries. The investigators were doing what they always do for any major explosion: get to the site quickly so they can obtain fresh testing material for the telltale fingerprints that are always present at a nuclear-triggered explosion. And yes, they found and confirmed that mini nukes were used, something that no one had accused Osama bin Laden of being able to do at the time. Ken Arducci, editor of EducateYourself.org, commented on the 9/11 attacks and said the staged and planned attacks of the WTC and Pentagon buildings were deliberate acts orchestrated by Illuminati planners using naive Arab dupes, terrorists, to pull off a suicide mission, in which they were allowed, guided, and facilitated by hidden intelligence agents and operatives. They are using this orchestrated ruse to stampede the public into accepting Big Brother control and ID programs, along with the sweeping away of constitutional guarantees and liberties under the guise of anti-terrorism legislation. The dissemination of biowarfare agents in America to reduce population needed a convenient cover, and the terrorist scenario provided it. I'm simply astonished at the gullibility of so many Americans in accepting this poorly covered-up orchestration. The growing number of websites and well-written articles that are exposing the details of this deception, from the planted bombs in the WTC towers to the stand-down of the military air defense forces while the hijacked planes were en route, makes it abundantly clear that the 9/11 attacks were a ruse, a charade, a setup that even a child should recognize. Coincidentally, there was warning of this kind of attack prior to 9/11, and it came from the mouth of Milton William Bill Cooper on the 28th of June in 2001 when he said, "Be prepared for a major attack, but it won't be Osama bin Laden, it will be those behind the New World Order. Whatever is going to happen that they are going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it." On the same day he predicted an upcoming government false flag and named CIA operative Osama bin Laden as the scapegoat. On the 5th of November in 2001, Cooper was shot dead. He wrote a fascinating book which I have read entitled Behold a Pale Horse in 1991. In it he talks about the document Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars that was found in an IBM photocopier but was dated May 1979. He also talks about secret societies in the New World Order as well as secret governments. Well worth reading. A Freedom of Information request filed by Kristen T. Harris of The Rundown Live resulted in the release of hundreds of documents relating to William Bill Cooper. The documents that were collected by the U.S. government paint Cooper's actions as controversial, such as hosting a talk show by means of shortwave radio and frequently condemning the federal government, Justice Department and the FBI for the atrocities at Waco and Ruby Ridge. The records show that Bill was convinced there is a government-sponsored socialist conspiracy to establish a new world order. He caught the attention of the FBI in 1997 over allegations surrounding the Oklahoma City bombing and Timothy McVeigh, according to the FOIA. After the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Building, a White House memo was read on the airwaves by Rush Limbaugh which stated that William Cooper was the most dangerous radio host in America. The evidence points overwhelmingly to the conclusion that all three buildings were destroyed by controlled demolition. Given the far-reaching implications, it is morally imperative that the hypothesis be the subject of a truly scientific and impartial investigation by responsible authorities. This is a quote from a Europhysics report, dated September 2016 by Stephen Jones, Robert Correll, Anthony Zambotti and Ted Walter.